Budgeting can be tricky. Trying to figure out which bills you should pay this week. Wouldn't it be nice if you had enough money to just pay the whole month's worth of bills and then forget about it for a few weeks? Well, with our time it's similar. Maybe we have 4 weeks of 40 hours of work time, so say 160 hours to work this month, but we don't have it all available right now. We only have today and this week that we're working on. In a previous video, we looked at how to budget our week as far as our time by appointments, meetings, routine tasks, and then seeing how much is available for projects. So when we're looking at our time budget for the week, we have to take a really close look and a careful look at our projects. We have to prioritize which projects or project steps we're going to put in this week's time budget. And there are several things to consider when you're doing this. So let's look at 4 factors to consider when you're choosing which projects you're going to put in this week's time budget. The first factor is deadlines. Now, this is obviously the most important thing we have to look at. However, we have to remember that it's not very efficient to always be working in what I call screaming order. Whoever wants something the most or screams the loudest gets it first. As they say, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. Well, that isn't super efficient. Sometimes it's necessary when we are just slammed with things to do. We have to operate that way. But it doesn't work that well on a long-term basis. Now, we want people to be able to count on us to keep our commitments, to follow through and meet our deadlines. So if there's a firm deadline for a project and that deadline happens this week, then that gets priority in our time budget. Also, if there are negative consequences for not meeting a deadline, that's a huge consideration. So the very first step when you're trying to choose what projects you're going to work on this week is to take a look at the deadlines on your current projects. And if you have, for example, 3 deadlines this week, work on the project that has the closest deadline first, and then you can move on to the others that are due later. Now, what do we do if we don't reasonably have enough time to meet all of our deadlines this week? Then it's time for some other actions. We might need to make some adjustments. So maybe we're going to ask for an extension. Maybe there are extenuating circumstances. Hopefully it's not just our lack of planning or our procrastination. But if something truly came up that made things take longer than was anticipated, it's reasonable to ask for an extension if it's possible. Another solution might be to work overtime. And we have talked in other videos about setting a limit on the number of days you're going to work in a week and the number of hours you're going to work in a day. So if you do have to do this, it should be temporary. You don't want this to become a long-term practice and you end up burning out. So another solution is to ask for someone to help you. Now, this might be someone you work with or a volunteer, or if the deadline is that critical, you might need to pay someone to help you. So there are various options if you have too many deadlines this week. But what we're going to talk about in the other factors when you're choosing which projects to do this week, we'll look at some long-term solutions to keep you from ending up in that scenario where you have too many deadlines piling up in the same week. So the second factor is margin. And we've talked about margin in several videos. It is a very important factor when you're choosing your projects to put in this week's time budget. If you're always finishing a project just before the deadline, that can make life really, really stressful. The other problem is that it doesn't allow things like unexpected things that come up. For example, health issues for you or a family member you're caring for, emergencies, someone gets hurt or you have a flood in your house, other things like that come up, emergency trips that you have to make. If you're always working to just finish before the deadline, you have no margin at all for the unexpected things in life, things that we can't predict. They just happen whether we're ready for them or not. Could also be a breakdown of your computer or software. Sometimes your computer will run an update and it will mess everything up. It might take you the whole day to fix it and get it back to normal. What do you do if you had something that the deadline was that day? This is why we need margin. Another reason is you may be waiting for information from somebody else before you can do your part. And if you don't follow up with them until just before the deadline, maybe they're not going to be available to help you. And you might have last minute meetings that you have to participate in, emergency meetings that get called. So there's all these scenarios that are unexpected things. And if you have margin, it's going to give you some breathing room. And you can focus on doing your best work without feeling pressured when you have put margin into your schedule. So if you can create margin by completing projects before the deadline, your life is going to be a lot calmer. Now, the third factor to consider when you're choosing what projects you're going to work on this week in your time budget is that to create margin, you need to work ahead. So working ahead, that is going to mean that you plan to be done before the deadline. So the best way to ensure that that happens is by planning out your projects. So if you have a project deadline Friday and there are 4 major parts to the project, you could do one each day from Monday to Thursday, and that means you're going to be done a day early. Well, I'll tell you this, people are not happy when you're late, but they're really happy when you finish early. So when you are planning your projects and working ahead, you need to consider the deadlines that you promise. It's better to under-promise and over-deliver. And that way people are going to be happy with you if they get it sooner than expected. Now, if we're talking about a large project, this can go beyond the scope of the week as far as working ahead. But the same principle applies. Say you have a large project due at the end of November. You would map out the steps and the estimated time for each one, and then you'd plan to finish mid-November. That gives you a 2-week buffer or margin so that you will easily meet the deadline, even if there are unexpected things, and you won't end up stressed. The fourth factor in choosing your projects for this week's time budget is theme days. And in a previous video, we talked about various ways to choose theme days for your week. You can do it by roles, by whether the work is in or out of your office, by the type of task, by whether it's alone work or people work, etc. But you can also choose theme days by projects. And if you're choosing them by projects, that doesn't mean that you're going to have the same sequence of theme days every week. It could vary based on which projects you need to work on, or based on how many projects you have in each of your roles that need attention this week. And I find that often we can work more efficiently on a project if we give it a big chunk of focused time instead of breaking it up and doing a little bit each day. Now, if you have something that you've been procrastinating about or that you're intimidated by, you might need to ease into it. So that little bit each day might help you to make some progress. But at some point, if you can throw some focused time blocks at that project, it's really going to help. If you can sit and work for up to 3 hours of focused time on one thing, the results are quite amazing. So when you're setting up your theme days in your week's time budget, consider projects and how that would play out. So now I want to give you a real life example of how I recently put this into practice on a large scale. I started this YouTube channel a few months ago, and every week I've been trying to create and publish a video on Fridays. But sometimes I'm tired on Friday, or I'm sick, or there are too many other things screaming for my attention. So it became a big struggle to get it done by Friday. And I just felt like I wasn't working very efficiently because I was doing all the steps for one YouTube video at a time. What I needed to do was to batch my tasks. So I made a plan moving forward to batch the tasks for each video series. I put a block of time in each week's time budget for YouTube videos. The first week is for preparing the series idea and creating the outlines. The second week is for actually recording the videos. The third week is for editing and scheduling the videos to be published on YouTube. And then the fourth week I can use to promote my YouTube channel. So that was a good start, but then I had to look at the first Friday publishing date for the next series and work backward from there, because I need the first 3 steps complete for that series a few days before the first video goes live. I need to plan it, record it, and edit it. Now I can do the promo work after. That is the 4th step. So what this meant was that at the beginning I had to double up so that I could get on track for working ahead. But now that the system's rolling, I'll always be ahead. I won't have to wake up on Friday morning wondering if I'm going to get my YouTube video done on time. And it's also going to save me time because I won't be transitioning from outlining to recording and setup to editing, opening software for each video. Instead, I'll be doing this in batches. So for example, to record this video, I had to have my software open, my microphone in place, my backdrop in place, and have my outline close by. Now, if I'm filming several at the same time, I only have to do that once, so I've already saved time. I suggest that you try this with one of your projects. Work backward from the first deadline and figure out how much time you need to spend on a project each week so that you can finish early, so that you can have margin. Batching makes you more efficient, and it's a really great stress reliever. Now we've looked at 4 factors to consider when you're choosing your projects for this week's time budget: deadline, margins, working ahead, and theme days. And I've given you a real-life example. So I have a question for you. Which project could you plan this way? Feel free to comment below. Which project could you plan this way? Be sure to get your free weekly time budget worksheet by clicking the link below in the comments. And stay tuned for more videos in this series, Time Budgeting 201, where we're digging into each of the various principles for time budgeting your week.